Hey, welcome everyone. You're listening to the next episode of Next in Queue. I'm your host, Rob Dwyer, and this is the podcast about contact centers and customer experience industry and the people in it. And I am so honored today to have joining me Danelle Rice, who is the customer service manager of North Point Bank up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. How are you, Danelle?
I am fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it is. I have to let everyone know I have been really excited about having you on the show because when I went through your history, I was like, well, this is some really cool stuff, not things that I necessarily see all the connections.
Yeah, there's a lot of random stuff in there. Been around a
Yeah,
while, so
it made me excited to talk to you and just learn more about your experience and
yeah,
kind of the things that you've learned along the way. So let's get started
sure.
by talking about one of the things that really struck me. You did PR for the Philadelphia Flyers.
Oh man, that's going back a ways.
Yeah.
I did. I interned there for a semester actually while I was in college. So got a lot of really great experience doing that. Met a lot of really fantastic people. That tends to be a theme in the places that I've worked in my career. You tend to meet a lot of really interesting people. You get to sort of jump on a lot of really crazy experiences. I loved the city, so it was really great.
So what was, I guess, right, this was when you were in college as
Yes.
an intern. I mean, what was the biggest learning experience that you had during that?
Gosh, the biggest learning experience, honestly, was more about learning to manage my own life, which I know is a little bit strange. I had worked before I went to the Flyers to intern. I had worked summers at a stock car racetrack in a different state as well. So I was used to the sports world and how it worked and how the different pieces all fit together. But when I went to Philly, I was learning how to live on my own at the same time as having an internship. And I had a little bit more experience than most people in my internship class. So it was interesting to look at kind of all the different pieces of how it works from a team perspective, because I had up until that point had been at in the sports industry at the venue level. And then I was with the Flyers at the team level. So it was a whole different perspective to look at it based on a group that works and performs inside a building versus the building itself, hosting all of the teams and athletes that then perform in the building, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Are Philly fans everything everyone says they are?
Yes. And it's a ways back in my memory banks, but they are quite passionate fans, definitely. Um,
I love the way you put that. They're quite
yes.
passionate
They are
fans.
quite passionate fans, and their players are quite passionate as well. So that's a really neat thing to watch, the interaction during a game and on ice with their fans versus their players. And it was a really interesting thing to be a part of, even from the admin perspective and the back office perspective as well.
Yeah, I imagine. I grew up in Kansas and we don't really do hockey there. That's not a that's not a thing. Probably a little bit more. But I remember, so I've only owned one hockey jersey in my entire
Oh,
life, and probably all my St. Louis friends now are hoping that I'll say it's a Blues jersey, and it wasn't. When I was in high school, I actually had a Flyers jersey. I
oh,
wore it
nice.
on the regular, the black and the orange. I thought the orange
Yep.
just had a nice pop, and then I realized that orange really it pops, but it's not good on me.
Just not your color.
Not my color. I was a big fan of Eric Lindros when he was a center
Yes.
Flyers, and
Yep.
so that's how I came to be kind of a Flyers fan. And
Sometimes it only takes
then
one player for somebody to get excited about it.
yeah, and then I kind of got off of the hockey train for a long time after that.
Yep.
And then I moved to Minnesota for a couple of years, and I learned
Oh
what
my.
hockey fans are actually like. And
Yes,
yeah, so it's different, which I assume that you know a lot about because you are actually from Michigan, correct?
I am. Yes, born and raised up actually about 100 miles north of where I work. So I'm even even more a northern girl than
Yeah.
anything else.
After college, you ended up moving to Colorado. Is that right?
I did, yes. So my summers in high school and college, I actually worked for a venue called Pikes Peak International Raceway, which was at the time they did NASCAR, IndyCar, some smaller club racing events, and I worked there, like I said, throughout high school and college. And then after college, they had a full-time spot for me. So I did one season there, and then unfortunately, they were purchased by the competition and shut down for
Mm.
competition purposes. So I ended up in Colorado 6 months after I moved there with no job. So that
Oh,
was a bit of
exciting.
an adventure. Yes. Not one I care to repeat, but it was a bit of an adventure at the time.
Yeah, so, what was that transition like going? I mean, obviously, you had already been some into some different areas of the country, but what was that transition like moving to Colorado out of college from where you were?
I had family there too, so that transition was a little bit easier for me as well. And I worked with a member of my family there too, so it wasn't as hard as if I had just kind of picked up everything and moved myself and started over. But it was weird to not um, long term not be able to see my family because we're really close. So to not to have to pick up the phone and talk to them versus walk
Yeah.
to the next room and explain what my day was like and what kind of fun stuff I was doing, that was a little bit of a change for me. Um, so I that takes a little bit of growing up, I think, just to realize that you now have a career and it's not just a job. And you're officially out of college, so you're like a real adult, with job and health
Mm.
insurance and all that fun stuff. So it was a bit of a challenge to get used to just not being around them and only seeing them twice a year. But I made a lot of really great friends. We kept really busy, so that was always a good thing. I worked almost continuously through the entire race season, so it was quite the experience.
So after the racetrack closes down, so what
Yes.
now?
Well, now, by serendipitous circumstances, I ended up with the professional bull riders. And that in itself was 12 years of a whirlwind of adventures. And, we started off kind of in a little bit of what I'm sure everyone who worked at PBR at the time would call a bit of a mess. Um, we were headed into the World Finals, the PBR World Finals, which, if anybody knows anything about bull riding, it's basically the Super Bowl of bull riding. And back then it was 2.5 weeks of competition. It was 2 weekends, but it was split over almost 2 weeks. So we lived in Vegas for 2 weeks, basically, doing competition and all the things that go with it, all the fan events that go with it. And it's just, I worked for the company for 10 days before I was on a plane and going to Vegas. And in that time, I also was finishing up the season that they were currently in. And it was all, I'm not even sure how we pulled it off, except by a lot of prayers and the grace of God in a lot of ways. I remember going into Vegas and just thinking, just let us live through it. Like however it ends, just let us live through it. And next year is going to be better. And I think I said that maybe 50 times in that 2 week period. I said, I'm sorry it's a mess. We're doing the best we can to clean it up. Just give us this break this year and everything will be better next year. And people were so gracious, from our athletes to our fans to our sort of VIP guests that we see every year. There's a charitable arm to PBR as well. And those folks that were involved in the charity arm also received tickets as part of their donations in a lot of cases. And so they were really gracious to us too, to let us have kind of a rebuilding year. to get the ticketing program up off the ground in a much more structured fashion. I think it was the first time that they really realized that ticketing professionals are real, like they're a real thing. Before that, it was seen kind of as an accounting function, which it sort of is an accounting function, but it has some really specialized, kind of nuanced pieces to it that if you're not involved in it, it gets really confusing and can pile up really fast. So once we kind of hit the ground running there, my work partner and I had worked together for a really long time, so we could communicate without actually using words. And it was easy for us to kind of jump in, and it was messy, but it was, we understood what needed to be done and how it needed to be restructured. So it took a long time to get it under control, but once we did, it was really a neat experience to have.
So tell me more about this ticketing professional. Like, what goes into that? What all are you doing, and who are you working with on a daily basis?
Yeah, so in our case with PBR, we worked with all of the venues. And at that time, that was around 30 different venues throughout the country. So um, on the Major League Tour, they would go from tour stop to tour stop. And then we would work with the venues themselves to take an allocation of tickets for a fan club that we had and get those set aside for our fan club folks to purchase through our office. We also worked with our corporate sponsors. So at the time, we had corporate sponsors like Jack Daniels and Ford and those types of groups who had tickets built into their sponsorship contracts. And then we would take responsibility for getting those tickets out to each individual rep or a specific company rep to then deliver to their local markets and do their promotions with their local markets. And then on top of that, we also did ticketing for, our VIP guests, our ownership group, our athletes as well. So it was kind of anything that wasn't general public was then us.
That sounds like a lot of logistics and a lot of dealing with special requests type of things.
Yes. So I cannot tell you how many times I heard, "Don't you know who I am?" And, "Oh, by the way, didn't I tell you I needed this?" So those quickly became like my two least favorite phrases, to the point where people would just say them to me to see what I would do. Um, and my answer usually to the question, "Don't you know who I am?" was, at this point, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do the best I can for everyone. So while I'm excited that you are you, it doesn't change the answer to the question of what happens next. Can I have what I'm looking for? So
Yeah, a lot of, I imagine when you're dealing with those kind of one-time events, right? Whether it's an event like that, or maybe it's a concert, or and I think about what I've bought tickets for, sporting events, those kinds of things. Like, there are just some of those events, like there's only so many tickets to go around, and uh, when the demand exceeds what's there, you can run into some challenging situations when you're dealing with people that want tickets that don't currently have them.
yes, you can. And for us, it was the challenge that we usually ran into. We would go, in certain cases, we would go to the same venue every year, or every couple years, we'd go to the same venue. So we had some really good relationships with the building folks and their box office people, to kind of we could figure out which ones were more willing to help than others, and which ones would help us put the puzzle pieces together in different ways. The trick for us, if we went into a new building, was the setup, the floor setup. So the going into an arena, there's dirt, there's back pens for the animals, there's, you know, fencing around the arena to keep the bulls in and the people out. So all of that stuff requires space. And on occasion, and this didn't happen very often, but on occasion, someone would go in and pre-measure where all of those things had to go. And then they would tell us where the chute line would fall. So where the bulls would come out of the chutes, where the bull and the rider would come out of the chutes. And that line would be where we would start selling tickets. There were a few occasions where that line was not in the right spot. And we started selling tickets based on where we thought the chute line was going to be based on such measurements. And then we'd end up a few feet off in either direction. And that turned a ticket that would normally be $100 into something that was definitely not worth that if it's already behind the chutes. So it would get challenging where you'd sell this seat and then all of a sudden it wasn't there, or it wouldn't, the sight line would be blocked. So you couldn't actually use that seat, but then you'd sold everything else on the other side of it. So that was, sometimes we just got the chute line didn't fall in the right spot. And then you're like, okay, well, here we go with plan B again. So we got pretty good at fitting the puzzle pieces together. And that's really what it always felt like. Because it's just a giant jigsaw puzzle. And you have to know how to put all the pieces together and how to keep everybody, all your corporate sponsors feel like they're the most important thing. And you want them to feel like they're really important to you. So you want to treat them well and make sure that you balance what they have with the way they need to use their tickets.
I imagine that there is just a lot of relationship building and maintenance
Yes.
when you're doing that.
Yes. Yeah, you would be absolutely right about that. People have to know that when you say something, this is how it's going to go. And in the beginning, that didn't really work that way because we were still working on someone else's plans. But as we built, we went into the next season, which would have been the 2006 season, as I'm dating myself. We built those relationships with people. And I'll be honest, when we first started, our COO at the time sent out an email to all of our corporate sponsors saying, we have new ticketing people, like this is going to be really exciting. And we did not get a very warm reception from some of those folks. We actually saw some of the emails that he got back and they were not as kind as we wish they would have been. But I can understand from their history why that would be the case. But I ended up meeting most of those folks probably about 6 or 8 months after I started. I ended up meeting most of them face to face, and the ones that I knew had a rough start, I actually went up and met with most of them and just said, I get that it was a bumpy ride to start with. This is what we're doing in the future. And most of them would say, well, it's been a positive experience since you got here anyway, so we're willing to give you a shot. And then, within a year or so, we proved that we were what we said we were going to be. And we did the best we could, to balance everybody's needs and everybody's wants against what was really there.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely a good lesson there in helping people understand when maybe at first blush they're a little underwhelmed, that you recognize that this wasn't a great experience or it didn't meet your expectations or ours.
Yes. Yep.
And we're working on it and it's going to get better. And once you can demonstrate that, it changes the perception for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a benefit to saying, hang with us, it's going to get better. But at the end of the day, you actually have to make it better too. You can't just say, please hang with us, it's going to get better, unless you legitimately are going to make it better. And sometimes we had to say, this did not go as planned, but here's what we're going to do instead. And here's why we think this will match up to what we were talking about before. So I think it's a lot about managing expectations, because before, the folks that were in those positions before us had said, if you want it, it's yours. But it isn't always there. So in those cases, it was more about saying, that's not how this works. Here's how it really works, though. And here's what we're going to do to give you what you need based on how I think, based on how you and I have talked about you using the inventory that we're giving you, or the resources that we're giving you, and really help them find a way to use what they have.
Yeah. So now you're back in Michigan.
I am.
And you work at a bank.
I do, yeah.
Let's talk about this transition, because this does not seem to me to be a natural transition. So how did this come about? Was this a job that came? Was it, I want to go home? How did that happen?
So I was actually home already. I had started working remotely for PBR
Okay.
for a while, and my time with them ended, due to some restructuring, which they often have to do. So when that time ended, I had an opportunity to say, what do I want to do next? And I always joke that I went from probably what felt like the least regulated industry in the world, um, where it's not true necessarily, but it always felt that way. Like I had a lot of leeway to do the things that I needed to do to make the people happy. And I have a lot of leeway here too, but it's very regulated. So I went from the least regulated industry, or what felt that way, to the most regulated industry in the world, um, and have just as much leeway to get stuff done, just have to be a little more, creative about it. So I decided if I'm going to flip the table, I might as well flip it all the way and just try something new. So that's what I did. Just gave myself the opportunity to try something new.
Well, nothing says Wild West like riding a bull. So,
It's true,
you know,
which I have
there
never
is
done,
that.
for the record.
Understood. You were selling tickets. I like to, as I was going through your history, part of me wished, even though I recognized, like, okay, you're not playing hockey, you're not driving stock cars, you're not riding
Not.
bulls, but I kind of wanted to pretend that you were, because I was like, this is just the best character in the world. Like,
So I can't skate for anything. I'm not good
okay.
on skates at all. I have been on the ice, terrible on skates. Um, I have been in a stock car, not driving myself. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not a big fan of driving anyway. So, but I have been a passenger. Um, I have not ridden a bull, and that's 99% by choice. Um, I that's not. I would be the person to get hurt. So, plus I respect them. I respect both rider and animal very much. I just know I don't want to be either one of them.
I understand. The city slicker in me is never getting on a bull, because that's only going to end in horrible injury and not to the
That's
bull.
that's how I always felt. I'm like, you know what? This bull is amazing and I love him dearly, but I do not want to be in that chute or in the arena or anywhere near there.
I mean, look, if holding on for 8 seconds is a sign of success, this is not for me.
Nope. And then you have to land. That's the other thing. You have to be able to get off and land and out of the dirt faster than that bull's going to come after you. So that's a little bit more of a challenge. I'm not a fast person. If I move too fast, I will trip and hurt myself. So I know this. It's just not
Yeah.
my skill.
The landing is the easy part. It's the getting up that's the hard part.
Right.
That's
Yes, you would be right about that. There's a lot of impact to that dirt. It might be dirt, but it's still hard packed dirt.
yeah, for sure. So, aside from the regulation piece, what's been the biggest difference in transitioning away from ticket sales, and maybe that's ticket sales in general or specific to PBR, to moving into banking? What's been the biggest thing that you go, wow, this is really different?
You know, I would have said probably that people take what we do in banking a lot more seriously, but honestly, sports fans are very serious about their sports and their tickets and their seats. So I would say probably the thing that was a bigger challenge for me was I transitioned to more of a leadership role with North Point than I've had in any of my other organizations. In my other organizations, the leadership came by default because I had been there longer than everybody else. So I had more historical knowledge than
Mm,
everybody else and more experience with, live events and dealing with fans, and I had been doing basically all of the jobs in those areas from the ground up. So I had a really solid base of experience for people to ask questions of and to say, hey, what would you do with this? In banking, I took on a very formal leadership role in becoming a manager on paper, and not just in practice. And I think it was a little bit more challenging for me to make sure that I was doing right by the people I was leading, um, instead of just answering people's questions as they asked, I had a better picture of what it looks like overall and making sure that I was doing right by those people, by making sure they had the right resources and they were comfortable enough to ask questions. And if they ever had issues with anything or were ever confused with anything, they knew that my door was always open in an informal or formal manner, however they wanted, to take after something. But that's probably been my biggest challenge, was learning how to be a formal manager instead of the impromptu version.
Yeah, there's a difference for sure between being really good at a job and being looked at as someone who has the answers to actually being a leader of people. And
Yes,
there's a weight difference on your shoulders that is
absolutely.
noticeable. So with that in mind, what was the biggest early lesson that you learned in doing that? Maybe it was a moment where you had a failure and you had to reflect back on it, or you just had to work through something that was new, that was unfamiliar.
My biggest challenge, I think, was when I came in to the team, it was very small. And there were a lot of different personalities, and being able to learn those personalities and also learn how to keep all those personalities working together was a big challenge for me, because there were a lot of differing personalities that were clashing at the time.
Mm,
And not severely, but enough that it was interrupting some of the flow. And I think I learned really early on that you can say, this is not acceptable. We're not doing this. This is not how we're going to run. If this is how we choose to run, then it might be time for you to find a different spot. Um, and that was really hard for me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, now I have to be, I have to be the hard nose in all of this. And I'm not normally that kind of person. Like, my normal personality outside of leadership is not that person. I'm super easygoing. I'm really kind of go with the flow most of the time. And then I started to realize that go with the flow doesn't really work when we're not going in the right direction. So it was a big change for me also to realize that I couldn't be a part of the team like everybody else. I had to
mm,
be the person standing on the outside, kind of trying to figure out how to pull everybody together. Um, and my dad gave me a book when I first started called "It's Okay to Be the Boss," and that actually helped me a lot, because while I had taken on informal roles before, I'd never actually been anyone's boss. So I had to figure out how that I could still be me and still do well with the work and still keep all the people that worked with me really happy. Because honestly, happy people make happier customers.
for
So,
sure. It reminds me of a conversation that I had not all that long ago, and we were just talking about the need for, in this case for you, it sounds like it was a little more informal, and maybe you can talk about some of the things that have been done formally if they have, but just that, right, that transition from doing a job to becoming a leader, like there are insights that you need and less that you need to be successful at that. And just going into it blindly is
mm-mm.
you get bludgeoned really quickly.
Yes.
And so having some resource, whether that's a book or formal training, workshops, online learning, whatever the case may be, can be hugely beneficial in allowing you to make that transition successfully and not setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a few things that really helped me a lot. My boss was amazing. He recognized that I didn't know anything about banking. And I was really upfront about that to everyone I talked to, because they would say, "Where did you come from?" And then you would tell them the story and the conversation would stop. And no one would, they'd be just staring at you like, "Wait, did I hear that right?" Um, so I was really very forthcoming with people to say, I don't know I understand banking principles because I have a bank account, and I understand loan servicing principles on the basics, but I need your help to teach me the mechanics of the actual work. I can work with the people. I can balance the people. I can teach them how to work together. I don't know the mechanics of the work. So that was kind of a way for me to make connections with the people on our team, for me to stand up and say, I don't know how to do this. Will you show me how you do it? And then explain to me why we do it this way. And I learned, I would go to my boss and I would say, this doesn't seem right to me. I'm thinking more along these lines. And he would either say, you're on the right track, or he would say, nope, that's not how we do this. And this is why we do it this way. And then I would start to learn that way. So he's been a great support system to me, just from a learning perspective, even a leadership perspective as well. Just to be able to bounce things off of him, and people in leadership positions in other departments were incredibly welcoming to me as well. They all said, we get that you don't know it, and we're all here to teach you. So ask as many questions as you want. If we feel like you're going off the rails, we'll let you know. So I couldn't have been luckier if I were going to flip the table on my industry. Is I came to a company that was so willing to help me learn it and let me be the kind of leader that I always wanted to have. So I've been very fortunate in that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And certainly, the companies that do that, when you get the right people, those skills, the knowledge skills, right? You can always teach that. The attitude and the leadership skills, you can teach leadership skills, but you can't teach the desire to really help people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
if you have that to begin with, like everything else we can teach. We can get you there if you've got the people that are willing to approach it that way.
Yep. And actually my boss is exactly that, because I had interviewed with other companies and most of them said you'd get bored here because you're coming from something that's really exciting, and we feel like you would last, half a second and you'd get bored. And so when I interviewed with him, that was actually one of the questions I asked. What did you see on paper that other companies aren't seeing? And he said, well, you have the soft skills, right? You can talk to people, you know how to get people to work together, you can work on a team. I can teach you all there is to know about banking and all the other mechanical stuff. I cannot teach you how to deal with people. You either have that skill or you don't. And I think that's absolutely true. We've all seen people who think they have the people skill and they really don't. And then you just try to figure out how to get them into places where they'll do some really good stuff. But it's a bit of a struggle if you have someone who thinks they're really great with people and they're not so great with people. So I'm very fortunate in that he recognized that my random collection of experiences could be, developed into something that's hopefully doing well.
So I want to switch gears a little bit because I had a quick little conversation actually related to banking with on LinkedIn with Jeff Toyster recently, who was talking about an experience that he had with a digital app. It was a bad experience. But I am curious, as someone who's been in the banking industry, what you have seen from a digital adoption standpoint, and what challenges you've run into, and how much, if any, has that changed what you've had to do as far as the people who are dealing with customers?
Yeah, digital adoption is everywhere, right? It's everywhere in banking, it's everywhere in your life. Everything's online these days. And our experiences on our banking team are interesting because we have so many people who are of the older generations. And I say this, my parents are in their mid 60s. So every time I say older, they think I'm talking about them. They, we have people who are, in their 50s and 60s and even 70s who are trying to learn online banking for the first time. And they're excited. They call us and like, I have this app. I have no idea what to do with it. So you're like, okay, well, downloading the app was a big step. you kind of have to walk through it with them step by step and say, do you see this on your screen? Do you see that on your screen? And what we find is that people really want to do these things. You get the population, and it's the majority of the population that really want to move themselves into the digital age. And then you get a few, and I know several of these folks as well, who don't want the digital age. They really just want to talk to a human. Like, don't make me pull out the computer. I don't like the computer. It never does what I want it to do. And I have family members that always say that too. The computer never does what I want it to do. And I'm like, well, you have to actually tell it what to do, right? So there's a little bit, we kind of run into both aspects of that, where somebody's like, I just got this and I'm really excited about learning this technology. And then you kind of have to walk through them step by step. And that's a longer interaction for people. But once you get them there, it's like the light bulb turns on, and then they just feel like it's completely successful. And they will call you back several times when things don't look exactly like they did on day one. But we find that communication is probably our best tool in that. Make it clear, make it simple, stick with them, let them know that it's okay to ask questions. We have on occasion suggested that they find a son or a daughter, grandson, granddaughter, somebody who is a little bit more tech savvy than them at the onset to show them step by step through there if we've spent time and they're just saying, I don't understand what you're seeing. So we have suggested that on occasion, but for the most part, we're able to kind of take a look at it with them and just say, okay, tell me what you see exactly. And by then we can usually tell where they are just based on what they see. And if we can keep that communication going, we can usually get to a successful point.
Yeah, I think it's makes me feel old sometimes thinking that there is an entire generation of people right now who have grown up with smartphones as a thing. Like they've had smartphones or been exposed to smartphones since they were, really little at this point now. And so there is that opportunity where for the people that may not be as tech savvy to hopefully leverage, right? Friends, family, neighbors, someone at the church, like just
exactly.
anyone that you can find that is, in their early 20s or younger, and they'll probably have a really good handle on it. I wonder, has that changed though, because you're getting these kinds of questions? Has that changed kind of what you've had to train your people to do internally and change like the skill set that they have to deal with people?
Yes. Yeah, I would definitely say that. So one of the things that we actually talk to our folks about as we're going through the hiring process, and it's actually one of our interview questions: do you use online banking? How are you with technology? How comfortable are you with technology? What technology do you currently use? And it isn't, and I always start out saying there's no wrong answer to the question I'm about to ask you. Because a lot of people will think, oh gosh, if I don't answer yes to this question, or I don't say I've used these 5 platforms, they're not going to look at me. And that's not the case. It's just we want to know kind of where we're starting. If you're not tech savvy, and we've had some folks on our team who will tell us, like, I can use the stuff you give me, but anything else, yikes. Not really, like, I know the bare minimum of handling my own life, but yikes on anything else. So there is a lot of, providing screenshots for people and giving them opportunities. And we encourage people when they join our company to open an employee account, to sign up for the app, to be able to do all of the things and sign up for all of the services, so that when someone says, they call in and say, I'm trying to do a mobile deposit and I don't understand how this works, then we can take a step back and say, this is how it works. Let me log into my app and we'll walk through it step by step. So, and our banking team is really good about that, having the experience to do that step by step. Or someone says, I'm trying to log into the app and it's not working. Well, let me log into mine and make sure that it's not a mechanical issue, with the service itself. So it does change how we have to do things. We do a lot of refreshers on those things to make sure that people understand and they have a good repetition for that technology so that they're really comfortable and we are seen as the experts. So that if someone calls and they're even the least bit jumpy, the person on the other end of the phone is confident and says, don't worry, we got this. We'll stick with it until we're done. It's going to be fine. And you kind of just, you teach them how to stay calm, and they're doing everything out of repetition, and it just makes people feel more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different world when you are in a business like banking that is very has a traditional background. Let's put it that way,
Yes.
right? They've
Yeah,
been
that's a good
doing
way
the
to put that.
same thing the same way for many, many decades, if not uh, potentially millennia, right? I mean,
Right. Yes.
a lot of the principles in banking are very, very old. And so when introduce, I remember when I was a kid, like when you went to the bank, you went to the bank, like you just
Mm-hmm.
physically went to the bank. And then, ATMs were like, that was cutting edge technology for banks at that time,
Absolutely.
was an ATM. And it kind of stayed that way for a long time.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing this shift, and this shift has been going on for a long time, but it really is over, I would say, the last 5 to 10 years, really taking hold, and it's changing the way that you do business in
Mm-hmm.
the banking sector. One of the other things that I saw, so North Point is an award-winning bank.
Yes.
Um, Not to toot its horn,
We're
but
very proud of
I'll go.
ourselves. Yes. And we've
I
worked
would
really
go
hard.
ahead and let you toot the horn.
Yes.
I know this may be challenging to answer because you didn't come from a banking background and you weren't working at other banks. But I wonder, what is it that you think, that you see, that you are doing differently to lead in that sector from a customer experience standpoint? What's the, maybe, I don't want to, give away to all your competitors, but what's in your secret sauce?
Well, I think for me, at least from a leadership perspective, and I think that the folks, above me kind of believe this as well, and that's why we all work together so well. We believe in treating people the way we want to be treated. And I would go a step further and say, I want you to treat people like you treat my family. So this isn't just about how you treat me, but it's about how you treat my family. I want you to take the time to talk with them. I want you to take the time to make them feel comfortable, to answer their questions, to not rush them. I don't want you to feel like you have to get them off the phone in a certain amount of time. And I understand the metrics of a call center and making sure that you hit all of the important metrics. But for me, and for our team, it's more about the actual experience and making sure that if you have a question, we're going to answer it. If we feel like we can find a different piece of information for you, we're going to go out and find that information. If we see that you're struggling in one direction or another, we're going to pull you back this way. And we're going to say, this probably isn't the direction you want to go. Let's come back a little bit more towards center and have you tried this? Um, and for us, that's really working well because people will say to us, I never would have thought of that. And most people wouldn't have told me I'm not, I'm heading off in this wrong direction. So not only are our rates competitive, which we love, right? That's kind of an easy way for us um, to be competitive in the market, the normal ways to be competitive. But one of the other things that we look at too, that I think sets us apart is we track our live answer number, which is the number of calls we can answer before they actually hit our call queue. So for us, that is one way that we can differentiate ourselves from other groups in the industry and other banks in the industry. And people will say, wait, I didn't have to wait on hold? Like that's very weird to me that I just picked up the phone and then you were there. And we get that a lot too. People will, they'll stay, in our queue for maybe 30 seconds if they're in the queue, and they'll say, wait, they'll oftentimes like put us on speaker and then leave to go do things and realize that we're actually there. And they're like, wait, sorry, hold on. And you hear them from across the room, wait a second, I'll be right there. Because they just they weren't expecting us to pick up in such a quick time frame. So they like the fact that they get real people. They like the fact that we are patient and we allow them to ask as many questions as they like. We put them in, we send them in the directions that we think are best for them to go in. We recommend things based on where they're at now. So a lot of it's just, like you were saying, relationship building. That's big for us.
Mm-hmm.
We really do believe in treating people the way we want to be treated. And I always say the way I hope you treat my family. And we have a really wonderful team that's just, kind of willing to take a step back and look at what you're trying to accomplish and then showing you exactly how to get there.
Yeah, you said it, because I was thinking it as you were going through all of that. I was thinking, sounds like relationship building. Like that sounds like what you're doing is just really building strong relationships with your customers. And a big part of that is I am willing to take the time to care about you.
Yep. And you can tell when you're talking to someone, whether they work in a call center or you're just talking to a random person, you can tell when somebody's distracted. You can tell when they're not focused on the conversation. And it makes you feel like, I'm sorry, am I wasting your time right now? And nobody wants to feel that way, least of all when you call someone who's handling your money, right? So it's important for us to be focused and to be doing things and providing the information that's going to help people do whatever they are, whatever they set out to accomplish. So I think for me, it's always been more about listening than it has been about speaking. So I always tell people, slow down and listen to what people are telling you. Your brain's going to be 2 steps ahead because that's just how your brain works. It's going to be 2 steps ahead of the conversation, but make sure you let the person on the other end of the line finish what they're saying before you jump in to provide the information your brain thinks they're looking for. Because sometimes they will throw a curveball in there where you think the conversation's going in one direction and then all of a sudden they say one thing and it's like, oh, nope, that would have been the wrong answer. And then, you just kind of have to focus and listen to what they're asking and then provide the information from there.
I think that's an amazing lesson for anyone, whether you're working on the front lines or not. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in wanting to help.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
They're halfway into their sentence and you're like, I have the answer for
right.
you. I have the answer and I'm ready to give it to you. And then because we are so excited to help that we forget, like, continue to listen, because there may be something else going on. There may be another facet to this problem that we need to make sure that we address. And quite honestly, they just want to feel heard. And so if we give them that opportunity, they feel heard and we'll still have the solution for them. It's still
Absolutely.
there.
Yes. And I've always been a big fan of, and this is in leadership and in general life, in your job, listen more than you speak, because you will never learn anything from listening to the sound of your own voice. So that gives you an opportunity to take a step back. It also gives your brain a little bit of a break because you're not constantly trying to think of the next thing to say when somebody is still in conversation. So just listen. It's a simple thing, but it's a huge thing.
It is. There is one thing you will learn by listening to the sound of your own voice, and I can speak from experience. It's that you will not like it.
Yeah. I'm often told that I don't even sound like myself. Like my phone voice is so opposite of my actual voice that even when I talk to my family or leave them a message, I have to say, this is me. Because apparently those are very different, although I have no idea why. But I have noticed that the sound of my own voice has a tendency to annoy me when I hear it in recordings. So this podcast and I will probably not be the best of friends.
I understand.
but I feel like it's just so important to listen more than you speak in any aspect of what you're doing, because you never know what you'll miss.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And it's a great lesson, I think, for everyone, right? To
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to people. And it's also a great way, quite honestly, there have been a lot of studies done. Like, if you want to, make friends with people, like, ask them questions, be
Mm-hmm.
interested, and just listen to them. And it turns out
Engage. Yeah.
they like you more because you're listening to them.
People want to be heard.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know these easy lessons, but they really can be challenging to put into practice on a regular basis. And
Yes.
it sounds like that's something that you guys work really hard at on a daily basis.
We do try really hard to do that. And I think one of the ways that we do it starting out from training and moving forward is keep an eye on the clock, but don't let it rule what you're doing. Make sure you're
Mm.
not on a call for 40 minutes, letting somebody tell you their life story, gently bring the conversation back in the right direction, but also realize that sometimes people just need the opportunity to share. So balance that out with what you're trying to do for them, and then it kind of just brings it full circle. They'll feel like they're heard. We'll get done what we need to. We don't have to spend an hour on the phone talking to somebody. And they're going to feel like they had a good experience with us. So they're going to come back to us and they're going to share that out with people, whether it's on social media or in some cases, it's like the weekly card game or however that works. They're going to share those experiences with people. So we really want them to have a good one. So when they start sharing, all they have to share is good.
Yeah, that makes me wonder, how much are you seeing, if at all, and I don't know if this is part of what you do, but how much do you see social media commentary on the bank?
There, and I would probably have to check with my marketing team because I usually get just the questions. Like I see this, I'll get a message from my marketing team saying someone asked on social media this question. What should I answer? So I get a little bit of that, but we don't. I don't see a tremendous amount of negative um, interaction going through social media. Um, a lot of what we see is like people who are confused about how something works, or
Yeah.
um, they feel like they asked a question and they didn't get the answer they were looking for. So there's a little bit of that. That just requires a little bit more explanation. I think sometimes people think that we make up rules, then we have to take a step back and say this isn't a North Point rule. This one is an actual rule. So there's a little bit of that too, with helping them understand that we are very regulated. So we don't generally, we're not making these rules up. I promise you, they do come from somewhere. So, but I don't see a tremendous amount of negative publicity going through social media. But we are very cognizant of the fact that social media is a tool for us. It's a tool for us to get our name out there, but it's also a tool for other people to express their feelings, good or bad. So we
Yeah.
want to make sure that we're giving them the opportunity to have good experiences with us so they have no reason to voice negative experiences or negative feelings about us or anything that we're doing.
Yeah, it seems like we just had I had a guest on the podcast who brought up a book, and I should know it off the top of my head, but the whole point of the book was that, it used to be the rule was a positive experience, they would tell one person, and a negative experience they would tell 10. And really that dynamic has shifted significantly, because
Yes.
negative experience now is not 10. And I think the title of the book was 10,000, but it's not even 10,000 anymore, depending on
No.
what kind of following someone has on social media, how big their network is.
Hmm.
And once people start commenting, that can go
Absolutely.
viral in a hurry. So
Oh, yeah.
it's really important to manage those expectations so that people have good experiences, so that you are not on Twitter talking, or trying to, you know, deal with a negative experience that's gone viral.
Right. And really, if you see something that's negative, um, respond to it in a way that says, please reach out to us, or please, provide information so that we can reach out to you and really solve the problem that you're having. Because I
Yeah.
feel like you're headed in a different direction than we really should be going. And not just because you're posting on social media, but clearly you're not feeling like your experiences was up to par, so to speak. So
Yeah.
it's important to reach out and let them know that if they want help with the solution, we're here. So let us reach out and help you, as opposed to, and I have actually done this with, when I first started at the bank, there was a gentleman that somehow got a hold of my name and put it out on social media with my name on it. And my name is spelled funny, right? So I knew that he didn't know my name by seeing it in print because he didn't spell it correctly. But he had actually named me. I'm thinking, I've never talked to this person before. I've never received a voicemail. And I actually went through back all the way through my call history to make sure that I hadn't missed something. And I emailed back and forth with him and I talked with him. And at the end of the interaction, I said, I apologize that you think I was a part of this, but I have no record of speaking to you. I have no record of messages from you. I have no record of emails about you. So I apologize. I don't know what's going on. But at the end of the interaction, I said, how do you feel about changing your rating on such and such a website? Or how do you feel about changing the post that you made to say, we were able to solve this problem? And he actually was very receptive to the idea of taking down a negative review and posting a positive one based on, and I would never have thought, without advice from my boss and other leadership, I would never have thought to say, maybe you can take that down then. Like if this wasn't the true representation of your experience, and now that we've fixed your problem, maybe you can take that down. Or maybe you can update that to say we were able to solve this problem. And then it turns definitely a negative into a positive, and people realize that we aren't what you represented us to be.
Right. I think that's really good advice for managing ratings. Uh, and we're going to see this, I think, only continue to go further and further in this direction, right? There are all these different mediums to rate companies, to rate experiences. I know, I just stayed at a hotel. I traveled to see my Jayhawks get clobbered by the Sooners. I should have waited
Oh,
and got
so
to
sorry.
Texas to see them actually beat Texas. But I stayed in a hotel, and as soon as I left the hotel, not only did the hotel email me because they wanted me to rate them, but then Google popped up on my phone and was like, "Hey,
We saw you were
we
here.
want you, yeah, we want you to rate as well," right? So there are all these different mediums to rate experiences, to rate companies. And I think more and more we look to those ratings. If I'm on Amazon looking for something that I can't, touch and feel and hold myself,
Yep,
what do I have? I have ratings. That's what I'm going to look at. That's what I'm going to rely
absolutely.
on. And so we crowdsource all of that. And so, as a provider of a product or service or whatever the case may be, managing that is going to be critical to your business. And so, how you handled that strikes me as a really great suggestion for any team that is involved in dealing with people that leave poor ratings. Once you resolve that issue, let's go
Let's
ahead and
update.
talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, let's update your feelings on it just to let people know that if you have a problem, reach out. Not to say that we aren't going to make mistakes. Everyone does. Every company makes a mistake along the way. Like nobody's perfect. But to reach out and say, I have a problem and they actually helped me fix it, which is kind of, for larger companies. And in the grand scheme of things, we are not as large as some others, but that you're able to say, like, this is broken, but guess what? They reached out and said, let's help you fix this. Or
Right.
If it's not broken, it just is the way it is. They helped me understand why it is the way it is. So just to be able to do that and to help clean some of that up and sort of add clarification to their feelings on the matter and how it really works is, it can be a powerful thing. You're exactly right.
Well, I think that that is a great stopping point for us, because I really do think that that's a great takeaway. And speaking of takeaways, by the way,
Yes.
I have to thank you, because when we were first talking about you joining the podcast, and this, anyone who is considering whether or not to join the podcast, listen up. You asked me something that almost everyone else asks me. You were like, uh, what topic? Can I get some questions ahead of time? Like, what do you want
Yeah.
to talk about? And I have to say to everyone, like, that's not how this works, because I don't have questions prepared. I don't have a topic prepared. Like, we're just going to chat, and we're going
All
to see
right.
how this goes. And I, um, when we had this conversation, I said, you know what, maybe you can listen to an episode or two just to get a feel for how the podcast goes. And to your credit, you did.
I
You
did.
binged like 4 episodes in a row. And then you came back and you were like, yes, I'd like to be on the podcast. And I will never forget what you wrote. You were like, I wrote down at least one thing from every single one of those episodes that I can use with my team. And I was like,
Yeah.
really?
It, all you have to do is listen. There's something there in everyone. And I don't know that that's true for this one. That's going to have to be up to the listeners, but
There's stuff there.
I would say there's always something to learn, big or small. There's definitely always something to take with you. And I'm a firm believer in I don't know everything. So if I have an opportunity to learn, even if it's something small, I can take back to my team and say, we're going to start this and carry it forward, or we're going to stop doing this because there's a better way to do it. I think it was, and I haven't listened to many more episodes actually since then. I have a bunch on my list to listen to because I see the posts and the advertisements for them on LinkedIn, and I keep thinking I need to log in and see that because they look like they're having a blast. And there's got to be something there. So I agree. Each episode had something to teach me. So I hope our episode has it as well.
Well, I know it will. And it's all credit, quite honestly, to all the people that are generous with their time to come join me on the podcast. It was one of the reasons that I started this, because the expertise and experience of all these great people out there is far more interesting than anything I had to offer. But it made me feel really good when you said that. I was like, okay, well, there's at least one person who's getting stuff out of this. So I'm
I'm
going to
getting
keep,
stuff.
yep,
Please
I'm
keep going. I'm
going to
getting stuff.
keep going.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And if I approach you, dear listener, to be on the podcast, that's how it rolls. There are no scripted questions. That's not how this works. It's just a conversation about getting to know you. And so, Danielle, it's been my pleasure to get to know more about you and
Thank
about
you.
your
Thanks for having
journey.
me.
It was great. So I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And let me know once you've gone on your next binge, and tell
I
me
will
what I
for
can do
sure.
better.
I will let you know what I learned. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.